Chapter 1. The Fallen Warrior. The air on Daraxis IV was thick with ash and despair. Once a thriving colony world, the planet had been reduced to rubble and ruin by the relentless march of the Ravager clans, a brutal coalition of alien species driven by conquest and destruction. Cities that once glittered under twin suns now stood as graveyards of twisted metal and shattered glass, their silence broken only by the occasional rumble of distant explosions or the low hum of Ravager patrols. Captain Elias Kane crouched behind a crumbled wall, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. His eyes scanned the desolate street ahead, its surface littered with debris and the remnants of vehicles abandoned in haste. The once bustling marketplace was now a battlefield, its vibrant stalls reduced to ash. "Command, this is Kane," he whispered into his comm unit. "I've reached Sector 17, but it's worse than we thought. No signs of survivors yet." The reply crackled through the static. "Understood, Captain. Proceed with caution. Your extraction window closes in 20 minutes. Elias gritted his teeth. 20 minutes wasn't much time, but he had been in tighter spots before. As a soldier in the Galactic Coalition, he'd made a name for himself as someone willing to take risks that others wouldn't. It had earned him both admiration and reprimands in equal measure, but he didn't care. For Elias, the mission was always about the people, orders be damned. He moved carefully through the rubble, his boots crunching softly against the broken ground. His HUD scanned for life signs, but the display remained frustratingly blank. Then, as he rounded a corner, the scanner pinged faintly. "Finally," Elias muttered, quickening his pace. A warrior in the rubble. The signal led him to the remains of a towering structure, its skeletal frame leaning precariously against the ruins of a neighboring building. Smoke curled lazily from its shattered windows, and the faint sound of static crackled through the air. Elias followed the signal inside, navigating the maze of collapsed beams and broken furniture. The air was heavy with dust, and every breath tasted like chalk. His boots kicked up small clouds of debris as he moved deeper into the building, his rifle raised and ready. "Hello?" he called out, his voice low but firm. "Is anyone here?" A faint groan answered him, so soft he almost missed it. Elias froze, his heart pounding, and scanned the room. His eyes landed on a pile of rubble near the back wall, where a faint glow pulsed weakly through the dust. He approached cautiously, pulling away chunks of debris to reveal the source of the light. His breath caught as he uncovered a figure, a woman, though not human. Her skin was a deep, shimmering indigo, and her long, silver hair was matted with blood and grime. She was clad in battle armor, its once gleaming surface now dented and scorched. Her chest rose and fell faintly, and her glowing, violet eyes flickered open as he knelt beside her. "Easy," Elias said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm here to help." The woman's eyes locked onto his, and despite her weakened state, they burned with a fierce intensity. "A human," she rasped, her voice thick with disdain. Elias frowned but didn't back away. "Yeah, and you're lucky I am. Let's get you out of here." No, she said sharply, though her voice wavered. "Leave me. I don't need your help." "Really? Because you look like you're doing great," Elias shot back, his tone edged with sarcasm. "Listen, you're hurt, and this place isn't going to hold much longer. You can hate me later, but right now, we're getting you out of here." The woman tried to push herself up, but her limbs refused to obey. A pained hiss escaped her lips, and she collapsed back onto the rubble. "Damn it," she muttered, her pride clearly warring with her need for assistance. Elias didn't wait for her permission. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and crouched down, carefully sliding his arms beneath her. Despite her slender frame, her body was unnaturally heavy, likely due to her armor or some aspect of her alien physiology. "What are you doing?" she demanded weakly. "Saving your life," Elias grunted. "Don't make me regret it." The escape. Carrying her wasn't easy. The building groaned ominously with every step he took, the walls threatening to give way at any moment. Elias moved as quickly as he could, his muscles straining under her weight. The woman remained silent, though he could feel her eyes on him, her pride undoubtedly stinging. As they emerged onto the street, the sound of distant engines reached his ears. Elias cursed under his breath. The Ravagers were close, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone they found injured or otherwise. "We've got company," he muttered, shifting her weight as he quickened his pace. The woman's gaze sharpened. "Put me down. I can dash." "You can't," Elias interrupted. "So how about you save your strength and let me handle this?" She glared at him but didn't argue, her silence a reluctant admission of her vulnerability. Elias ducked into a narrow alley, pressing himself against the wall as a Ravager patrol passed by. The aliens were hulking brutes, their armor crude but effective, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. He held his breath, his grip tightening on the woman, until the patrol moved on. "You're reckless," she said quietly once the danger had passed. "Maybe," Elias replied, stepping back into the street, "but reckless beats dead." A glimmer of trust. They reached the extraction point with only minutes to spare. Elias carefully set the woman down behind a makeshift barricade and raised his comm unit. "Command, this is Kane. I've got a civilian, possibly coalition, requesting immediate evac." The reply crackled in his ear. "Negative, Captain. The evac zone is compromised. Fall back to the secondary point." Elias's jaw tightened. The secondary point was over a mile away, and the Ravagers were closing in. He glanced at the woman, who was watching him with a guarded expression. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated before replying. "Kalen. Kalen Valthera." "Well, Kalen," Elias said, slinging his rifle off his shoulder. "Looks like we're walking." She frowned. "You could leave me. It would be easier." "Yeah, it would," Elias said, his tone matter of fact. "But that's not how I operate." Kalen stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Then let's move." Elias hoisted her onto his back, his determination unwavering despite the odds. As they disappeared into the ruins, the distant sound of Ravager engines grew louder, signaling that their fight was far from over. Chapter 2. Bound by Duty. The ruins of Daraxis 4 stretched out like a graveyard of forgotten hopes. Smoke and ash hung in the air, masking the acrid scent of scorched metal and burned-out buildings. Captain Elias Kane trudged through the rubble, Kalen Valthera strapped securely to his back. Every step felt like a gamble, the enemy patrols getting closer with every passing minute. Kalen remained silent for the first mile, her weight an ever-present reminder of how fragile the situation was. Though her paralysis rendered her unable to fight, her pride as a Vraxian warrior wouldn't allow her to thank the human soldier carrying her. "Are we just going to walk in silence the whole way?" Elias finally asked, his voice cutting through the eerie quiet. Kalen didn't respond immediately, her glowing violet eyes scanning their surroundings. "I didn't ask you to carry me." Elias smirked, adjusting his grip. "No, but you didn't really have a choice, did you?" Her lips tightened into a thin line. "I wouldn't expect a human to understand the disgrace of being carried like cargo." Elias chuckled dryly. "Yeah, well, humans tend to have a different take on survival. Pride doesn't mean much when you're dead." Kalen huffed, though the faintest glimmer of amusement touched her expression. "You speak as though you've faced death often." "Comes with the job," Elias replied, his tone growing more serious. "Besides, this isn't about me. I'm just doing what needs to be done." A fragile alliance. The trek to the secondary extraction point was slow and treacherous. The city was a labyrinth of collapsed buildings and jagged debris, every corner potentially hiding a Ravager patrol. Elias moved cautiously, his military training guiding every step. Kalen, for all her disdain, couldn't help but notice his competence. "You're not like most humans," she said after a while. Elias raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment?" "An observation," she replied coolly. "You carry yourself like a warrior, but you lack the arrogance of your kind." "Arrogance doesn't get you very far out here," Elias said. "You want to survive, you learn to work with what you've got, even if that means teaming up with someone who doesn't like you much." Kalen's gaze softened slightly. "I didn't say I disliked you." "Could have fooled me," Elias muttered, a faint grin tugging at his lips. For the first time, Kalen allowed herself a small smile, though it disappeared as quickly as it came. A narrow escape. The pair reached a derelict building near the outskirts of the city, a once grand structure, now reduced to rubble. Elias paused, scanning the area for signs of movement. His HUD flagged heat signatures nearby, and his stomach tightened. "We've got company," he said, lowering Kalen gently to the ground. "How many?" she asked, her voice steady. "Too many," Elias replied grimly. "They're blocking the path to the extraction point." Kalen's jaw tightened. "Then we'll fight." Elias shook his head. "Not with you like this. I'll create a diversion, draw them away while you stay here." "Absolutely not," Kalen snapped. "I will not be left behind like some helpless child." Elias sighed, kneeling beside her. "Listen, I get it, you're a warrior, and you don't want to be treated like you can't handle yourself. But right now, you're hurt, and we've got no choice but to play it smart." Kalen's glowing eyes locked onto his, a storm of emotions swirling within them. She hated the truth in his words, but couldn't deny it. "Fine," she said reluctantly. "But if you die, I will never forgive you." Elias grinned. "Noted." The diversion. Elias moved swiftly, his training taking over as he set small charges along the edges of the building. He crept toward the Ravager patrol, his movements silent and precise. The alien soldiers, hulking brutes with jagged armor, stalked through the rubble with a predatory grace. Elias activated the first charge, a loud explosion drawing their attention. The Ravagers barked orders in their guttural language, splitting into groups to investigate the noise. "Come on," Elias muttered under his breath, planting another charge further down the street. One of the Ravagers spotted him, raising a plasma rifle with a guttural roar. Elias ducked behind a wall as the weapon discharged, sending a sizzling bolt of energy past his head. "Well, that didn't take long," he muttered, sprinting toward the next position. Kalen's resolve. Back at the safe house, Kalen clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her. She hated feeling useless, hated the thought of Elias risking his life for her. Her body was paralyzed, but her mind was sharp, and she wasn't about to sit idly by. She scanned the room, her sharp eyes landing on a discarded Coalition comm device. Activating it with a flick of her wrist, she tapped into the patrol's communications, deciphering their crude language. "They're splitting up," she muttered, her mind racing. "Fools." She began feeding false information into their comms, redirecting the patrols away from Elias. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him an edge. A close call. Elias ducked behind a collapsed beam, his heart pounding as plasma bolts scorched the air around him. He activated the final charge, sending a wave of fire and debris into the Ravagers' ranks. The aliens roared in confusion, their formation breaking apart. "The time to go," Elias said, sprinting back toward the safe house. He arrived to find Kalen waiting, her expression calm but her glowing eyes betraying her relief. "You're alive," she said simply. "Barely," Elias replied, panting. "Thanks for the assist. I heard the comm chatter, they were scrambling all over the place." Kalen's lips quirked upward. "You're welcome." A growing bond. As they continued toward the extraction point, the tension between them began to ease. Kalen, despite her initial disdain, found herself respecting Elias's resourcefulness and determination. He wasn't like the humans she had encountered before, arrogant, brash, and self-serving. He was different. Elias, for his part, admired Kalen's resilience. Even paralyzed, she refused to let her spirit waver. There was a strength in her that he found inspiring. "You're not so bad for a Vraxian," Elias said as they reached a safer area to rest. "And you're not as weak as I expected. For a human," Kalen replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Elias chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." The ambush. Their moment of respite was short-lived. As they neared the extraction point, a new threat emerged, Ravager ambush, larger and more coordinated than before. Kalen and Elias were pinned down, the air thick with plasma fire. "This isn't good," Elias muttered, firing his rifle in controlled bursts. Kalen's glowing eyes narrowed. "You've saved me twice already. Let me return the favor." Elias frowned. "You're paralyzed. What can you dash?" "Trust me," she interrupted, her voice firm. Elias hesitated, but handed her a small energy blade. Kalen activated it with a flick of her wrist, her movements precise despite her condition. As the Ravagers closed in, Kalen used the blade to deflect incoming fire, her warrior instincts taking over. Elias covered her, the two of them fighting as a seamless team. The extraction. The sound of coalition gunships filled the air as reinforcements arrived. The Ravagers, outmatched, retreated into the shadows, their guttural roars fading into the distance. A medic team rushed to Kaylin's side, preparing to transport her to safety. She looked at Elias, her expression unreadable. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "Twice." Elias shrugged. "Just doing my job." Kaylin's gaze softened. "No, you've done far more than that." As the gunship lifted off, Elias sat beside her, the bond between them stronger than ever. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, they faced it together. Chapter 3. The Enemy Within. The gunship's cabin rattled as it ascended through the smoky skies of Daraxis 4. Elias sat strapped into a bench, exhaustion etched into his features. Across from him, Kaylin Valthera remained silent, her violet eyes fixed on the horizon. Despite her paralysis, she carried herself with an air of defiance that left an impression on everyone who met her. ETA to Coalition Base Alpha, 15 minutes. The pilot's voice crackled through the comms. Elias leaned back, wiping a hand across his face. The immediate danger was behind them, but something in the back of his mind refused to settle. The Ravagers had been relentless in their pursuit, too coordinated for the scattered warbands they were known to field. Something bigger was at play. "You're quiet," Kaylin said, her voice breaking the silence. "Unusual for you." Elias smirked faintly. "Just thinking. Those Ravagers weren't acting like usual. They knew exactly where to find us." Kaylin's eyes narrowed. "You think someone leaked our position?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, "but it doesn't sit right. Someone's pulling strings, and I don't like it." Kaylin considered his words, her expression grim. "The Coalition has enemies within. Corruption, betrayal, none of it is new to me." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You're saying someone in the Coalition might be working with the Ravagers?" "It's possible," Kaylin said. "I was paralyzed during an ambush that only a trusted ally could have orchestrated. Perhaps I wasn't the only target." Arrival at Base Alpha. The Coalition's Base Alpha loomed on the horizon, a sprawling fortress of steel and glass nestled against the jagged cliffs of Daraxis IV's western ridge. As the gunship touched down, Elias and Kaylin were immediately met by a squad of soldiers and medics. "Captain Kane," a commanding voice called out. Elias turned to see Commander Thalos, a towering Vraxian with an air of authority. "You've done well to bring her back. Princess Valthera's safety is of utmost importance to the Coalition." "Princess?" Elias blurted, his eyes darting to Kaylin. She sighed, clearly unamused. "I omitted the title. It complicates things." "You don't say," Elias muttered, shaking his head. "I guess I'm your bodyguard now." Commander Thalos stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Captain, your report can wait. For now, rest. Medics will take care of the princess." Kaylin's eyes locked on Elias as the medics approached her. "Kane," she said softly, a warning edge in her tone. Elias nodded, understanding her unspoken concern. "I'll keep an eye out." Uncovering the conspiracy. Elias didn't rest. Something about the base felt wrong, the tension in the air, the way soldiers avoided his gaze, and the too perfect politeness of the officers. He wandered through the halls, keeping to the shadows, listening for anything out of place. It didn't take long. In a secluded corner near the command center, he overheard two Coalition officers speaking in hushed tones. "Thalos wants her dead," one officer said, his voice clipped. "The Ravagers didn't finish the job, so now it's on us." Elias froze, his stomach twisting. "And the human?" the second officer asked. "Collateral damage," the first officer replied. "We'll frame the Ravagers for the hit. No one will question it." Elias's blood ran cold. He slipped away before they could notice him, his mind racing. Commander Thalos, the very man who had greeted them at the landing pad, was plotting to kill Kaylin M. A dangerous alliance. Elias found Kaylin in the medical wing, her armor removed to reveal intricate cybernetic enhancements along her spine and limbs. The medics had repaired some of the damage, but her paralysis remained. "You're supposed to be resting," Kaylin said as he entered. "We've got a problem," Elias said, closing the door behind him. He quickly recounted what he had overheard. Kaylin's expression darkened. "Thalos, I should have known. You've dealt with him before? Elias asked. He was always a snake, Kalen said. But I didn't think he'd stoop this low. If he's working with the Ravagers, it could compromise the entire coalition. Elias nodded grimly. We need to expose him. But first, we need to get you mobile. Kalen raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose we do that? Elias grinned, holding up a small datapad. I found the schematics for a neural uplink in the base's database. It's experimental, but if we can get to the tech lab, we might be able to rig something. Kalen's lips twitched into a faint smile. You continue to surprise me, human. Infiltrating the lab. Under the cover of darkness, Elias and Kalen slipped out of the medical wing. Kalen rode in a modified hoverchair Elias had requisitioned, her sharp eyes scanning every corridor for signs of danger. The tech lab was heavily guarded, but Elias's military training made short work of the sentries. Once inside, he began searching for the neural uplink device. Found it, Elias said, holding up a sleek, silver device. This should interface with your spinal enhancements. Kalen nodded, her expression resolute. Do it. The process was delicate and time-consuming, but Elias worked with practiced precision. As the uplink activated, Kalen's body twitched, and her glowing veins pulsed brighter. Can you move? Elias asked anxiously. Kalen flexed her fingers, then her arms. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her movements tentative but steady. I can fight, she said, her voice filled with determination. Confronting the Los. Armed and ready, Elias and Kalen made their way to the command center. The Los was waiting for them, flanked by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. Captain Kane, the Los said smoothly, I hear you've been busy. You mean uncovering your little plan to sell out the coalition? Elias shot back. Yeah, it's been a productive night. Thalos's smile faded. You should have stayed in your place, human. Kalen stepped forward, her presence commanding. And you should have remembered who you serve, Thalos. The coalition will not fall to traitors like you. Thalos snarled, signaling his soldiers to attack. The final battle. The room erupted into chaos. Kalen moved like a force of nature, her regained mobility allowing her to unleash devastating strikes against Thalos's forces. Elias covered her with precise rifle fire, the two of them working in perfect harmony. Thalos, realizing he was outmatched, attempted to flee, but Kalen intercepted him. She disarmed him effortlessly, her blade pressed to his throat. Any last words? She asked coldly. Thalos sneered. You'll never stop the Ravagers. The coalition is already doomed. Kalen's gaze hardened, but she lowered her blade. You'll face justice for the coalition and for my people. A warrior's redemption. With the Los exposed and the conspiracy unraveled, Kalen was reinstated as a hero of the coalition. Elias, though offered a commendation, declined, preferring to remain on the front lines where he felt he was needed most. You saved me, Kalen said as they parted ways. Not just my life, but my honor. I owe you a debt I can never repay. Elias smiled. Just keep fighting the good fight, princess. That's thanks enough. As Kalen watched him walk away, she couldn't help but feel that their paths would cross again. And in the uncertain galaxy they called home, allies like Elias Kane were rare treasures indeed. Chapter 4. A Warrior's Redemption. The Coalition Base Alpha stood on high alert following the exposure of Commander Thalos as a traitor, but the shadow of the Ravagers loomed larger than ever. As the Coalition scrambled to regroup, Kalen Valthera and Captain Elias Kane found themselves thrust into the heart of the galaxy's most pivotal battle. The evidence they had gathered was damning. The Ravagers had infiltrated Coalition ranks, and the Los had provided them with critical intel in exchange for personal power. Worse still, a massive Ravager fleet was en route to Daraxis 4, poised to annihilate the base and its remaining forces. Kalen stood on the command deck, her restored mobility lending an air of renewed confidence. Her shimmering violet eyes scanned the holographic display of the incoming fleet. Beside her, Elias leaned against a console, his sharp eyes taking in the grim situation. That's a lot of ships, Elias muttered. More than we can handle with what remains here, Kalen admitted. The coalition officer in charge, Admiral Rollith, a stoic figure with battle-worn features, stepped forward. We need a strategy. If that fleet lands, we're finished. Kalen straightened. We won't let them land. We take the fight to them. Rolith frowned. Our fleet is outnumbered 3-1. That's why we won't use the fleet, Kaelin said, her voice resolute. We'll infiltrate their flagship and disable their command structure. Cut off the head, and the rest will fall. Elias smirked. Sounds like my kind of plan. Let me guess, we're the infiltration team? Kaelin turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. Who else would I trust with this mission? The final mission. The plan was as daring as it was dangerous. Using a stolen Ravager transport ship, Kaelin, Elias, and a small team of elite operatives would infiltrate the enemy flagship, the Bloodfang, and disable its command center. If successful, it would throw the entire fleet into disarray, buying the coalition time to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. As the team prepared to depart, Kaelin approached Elias in the armory. He was checking his gear, his movements methodical and precise. Do you ever hesitate? She asked, her tone softer than usual. Elias glanced at her. Sometimes. But I've learned that hesitation gets people killed. You? I hesitated once, Kaelin admitted, her gaze distant. It cost me everything. Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Not this time. We'll finish this together. Kaelin held his gaze, a flicker of gratitude crossing her features. Yes, together. Aboard the Bloodfang, the Ravager transport slipped through the fleet's perimeter undetected, its forged codes holding up under scrutiny. The Bloodfang loomed ahead, a massive, jagged ship bristling with weapons and exuding menace. As the transport docked, the infiltration team moved swiftly, disabling the hangar guards with silent precision. The corridors of the Bloodfang were dark and foreboding, lit only by the crimson glow of its emergency lighting. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and oil, a reminder of the Ravager's brutal nature. Kaelin led the way, her movements fluid and purposeful. Elias stayed close behind, his rifle at the ready. Command centers 3 levels up, Kaelin whispered. We need to move quickly. The team advanced, encountering sporadic resistance from Ravager patrols. Kaelin's restored agility made her a force to be reckoned with, her energy blade slicing through the enemy with surgical precision. Elias covered her flank, his sharpshooting keeping the team one step ahead. The betrayal. As they neared the command center, the team encountered heavier resistance. Ravager elites, larger and more heavily armed than their counterparts, fought viciously to protect their stronghold. The infiltration team took casualties, their numbers dwindling as they pressed forward. But the worst blow came from within. One of the operatives, a coalition soldier named Lieutenant Varric, turned on the team, revealing himself as a Ravager sympathizer. He disabled their comms and attempted to sabotage the mission, opening a blast door to let in more enemies. Kaelin confronted him, her voice laced with fury. You betrayed your own people for what? Power? Varric sneered. The coalition is weak. The Ravagers will rule the galaxy, and I intend to be on the winning side. Elias didn't hesitate. A single shot from his rifle ended Varric's treachery, but the damage was done. The team was pinned down, the command center tantalizingly close but heavily guarded. The final push. With no time to waste, Kaelin and Elias devised a desperate plan. Kaelin would draw the enemy's attention, using her agility and combat prowess to create a distraction, while Elias infiltrated the command center to disable the ship systems. You sure about this? Elias asked as Kaelin prepared to move. She met his gaze, her expression resolute. It's the only way. Don't get yourself killed, he said, his voice softer than usual. Kaelin smiled faintly. You too, human. She launched herself into the fray, her energy blade cutting through the Ravagers with a ferocity that left them reeling. Meanwhile, Elias slipped into the command center, navigating its maze of consoles and controls. Disabling the fleet. Inside the command center, Elias worked quickly, hacking into the Bloodfang systems with a mix of coalition protocols and his own ingenuity. The ship's alarms blared as he initiated a chain reaction within its core, destabilizing its power systems. Command center compromised. A robotic Ravager voice echoed. Critical failure imminent. Elias grinned. That's my cue. He sprinted out of the command center as explosions rocked the Bloodfang. In the hangar, Kaelin fought her way back to the transport, her armor scorched but her determination unwavering. Elias joined her just as the transport's engines roared to life. The Bloodfang began to collapse, its destruction sending shockwaves through the Ravager fleet. The remaining ships scattered, their cohesion shattered. A hero's return. Back at Base Alpha, the surviving members of the infiltration team were met with cheers and gratitude. The Ravager threat had been dealt a decisive blow, and Kalen's name was once again spoken with reverence among the coalition. As the celebrations died down, Kalen and Elias found a quiet moment on the base's observation deck, overlooking the stars. "You did it," Elias said, leaning against the railing. "You saved your people." Kalen shook her head. "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." Elias smirked. "Guess that makes us a good team." Kalen turned to him, her violet eyes shining. "The best." For the first time in a long while, Elias felt a sense of peace. And as they stood together beneath the endless expanse of the galaxy, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side.